Hi, welcome back to Reading Pathways. I'm Matt, and I am on another shelf here in the mostly contemporary fiction bookshelf as part of the Establishing a Reading Baseline project. So, again, basically, what this is establishing a reading baseline for myself as a relatively new reader in only the last couple years. And I'm trying to, and I have been, gathering and acquiring and used book hauling for a long time now, trying to build up a home library which consists of what I'm calling kind of a cross section, a representative sample of titles, authors, genres, and works across, time basically. But, this shelf specifically is, this case here is mostly contemporary fiction in the 20th century, 1950 and forward, pretty much into the 21st century. So that's kind of how I've arranged this. The bottom of this one at the very end is science fiction fantasy, which I have some more across the room, and I'm going to see if I can rearrange things a bit. But for now, I'm just kind of showing the collection here and what I consider, all the candidates that I'm looking forward to reading as part of this project. So without further ado, I'll try to move through this shelf here relatively quickly with just a couple little comments on what I have. And so Transwise up here, similar to the shelf above it that I did previously. I've been kind of using the horizontally stacked books as like author stacks. So if I've accumulated a couple from an author or, at least a little set of something, I try to put them up there to keep it sort of separate. So starting over here, we have done that with Vladimir Nabokov. One of the couple authors only at this point in my reading life that I've read more than one book. I've read Pale Fire and I've read his memoir, Speak Memory, and so far I'm really liking the Nabokov that I've been reading, so I'm trying to gather some more of him. So the things I have so far, we have Ada or Ardor in this gray vintage edition, which there's a whole uniform set of these for Nabokov, but I have this one, which I think is like a family saga love story, family decline type thing. Then, not much introduction needed here with Lolita. Certainly his most famous book, I would say, along with his most controversial. But I hadn't found a good copy of Lolita for quite a while until somewhat recently. So I have Lolita. And then the other one I have is Invitation to a Beheading. It's kind of funny with Nabokov. They're all in these sort of gray, white, vintage editions, but I ended up not really having any that are uniform together. So this one is its own format, this one is its own format, and then this is a separate one with the kind of striking pink block image in the middle there. So so those ones, and then a totally separate format of this little mass market paperback of Pinin, which Timothy Pinin, professor of Russian in an American college, who takes the wrong train to deliver a lecture in a language he cannot master. I think it's a character study on this guy Pinin, and it's supposed to be kind of bizarre, but also funny. Maybe it has maybe a little bit of shades of Pale Fire there with the professorial character, perhaps. So we'll see what Pinin's all about. But that's the Nabokov stack, and then there's a little 2-volume stack here of Umberto Eco. Since it was a hardcover, this is mostly all trade paperback the rest of the way down this bookcase, except for the hardcovers that I started this series with. So there are a couple hardcovers, though, that work their way into the horizontal stacking. The first of which is Eco's The Name of the Rose. And so this is, I think this is like a book club edition of this. I've seen it a few times out in the wild, but I did find it for $1 on a library cart one day, and it's one of the, pretty famous 20th century novel from Umberto Eco. It is a mystery novel, I guess, set in 1327. Franciscans in a wealthy Italian abbey are suspected of heresy, and Brother William of Baskerville arrives to investigate. So you have Baskerville playing off of Sherlock Holmes, so it's sort of a updated Sherlock Holmes type character from the medieval ages in Italy. So that's Name of the Rose, which doesn't need much introduction. And then I recently found Foucault's Pendulum from Eco as well. And I've heard this is complex, challenging, sort of, I don't know, I guess puzzle-ish in a way, this novel. But despite that, I've heard that it is definitely worthy of being checked out. And I found this totally almost free. I think it was a Goodwill outlet store with the huge bins of books where you got to dig through everything, and this was in there for like 25 cents in a pretty perfect condition floppy trade paperback. So those are the two Umberto Eco. And then I have another hardcover stacked sideways, Kazuo Ishiguro, Clara and the Sun. I originally had this in my sci-fi and fantasy section, but I don't know. I think it qualifies as that from this writer, but also he's, not really a writer in that genre. So I kind of separated it out, especially since I also have recently grabbed two more from him. So that's why I kept Ishiguro stacked sideways. I didn't put these above as an author stack, but I also have Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go. So I've heard endless amounts of things about this author and specifically these books. So looking forward to checking these out. This is one of the few books I grabbed that I do have the movie cover for. I try to avoid those usually if possible, but can't go wrong ever with a little Anthony Hopkins on the cover there. So that's fine. So if I put those back, there's one more slight little author stack here of Donna Tartt. So we have The Secret History. This I have read. It's been some years since I read this, but definitely a fan of it. I really enjoyed reading this from what I remember. And I actually would love to get around to this again, but I'm going to put in front of this reread all the other hundreds of books in this series I'm putting together to read those first. But I would like to reread this eventually, so I've kept it around. And then I do have The Goldfinch, kind of the other major Donna Tartt book, the Pulitzer Prize winner from 2000, pretty recently, 13. So yeah, in the 21st century. So there are definitely some 21st century books that I've gathered in here. Most of them are probably before that, but The Goldfinch I've definitely wanted to read for a while, especially since I did enjoy Donna Tartt with The Secret History. Okay, so let's try to keep flying through the shelf quickly and just go through them. So these are all, again, just things I find out in the wild, things I found at library carts, library sales, thrift stores, and the like. And whatever I find, if it triggers something, if it kind of stands out to me as an author or book or something related to something that I probably should read on this reading journey I'm putting together, then that's my criteria, basically, and that they're hopefully in decent condition. So this is The City of Marvels, Eduardo Mendoza. I've seen some books in this kind of pocket books fiction like setup here with this, with the kind of oversized trade paperbacks. This one was in decent shape. Let's see. Nothing succeeds like excess, and no one is more daring than Onofre Bovilla, an eminently corruptible peasant youth who stops at nothing on his way to fabulous wealth and power in Barcelona. I'm not going to read the summaries for all of these. It's going to be endless, but that one looked pretty interesting. And then continuing here, I'll try to take two at a time. This is Whirligig by Paul Fleischman. This was the product of a actual random number generator selection at a used bookstore. So, as I've explained in some early videos on this channel, sometimes when I'm hauling used books, especially if it's a really cheap thrift store or something, or if it's a used bookstore I've never been to and it's my first time there, I do have this little, fun like exercise I like to do where I punch the random number generator in, at least for one book, just to see what it brings me from a particular bookstore for the first time. And it gave me this from a store. I think it's a YA type book, technically. Brent Bishop is sent on a journey of repentance, a cross-country trip building whirligigs, which are wind-up toys, I guess. And will they be able to heal the wounds deep inside himself? So kind of a troubled teenager type protagonist in that one. Next, The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. I think she's a pretty prominent and famous author of contemporary Japanese literature. Maybe one of the more prominent authors in modern day Japan, from what I've understood. And I actually read this one. I read this earlier this year, sometime around the spring, which actually kind of lined up nicely with the cherry blossoms there. And I had some cherry blossoms sprouting around me at the time, so it kind of fit well with this. But yeah, this was a good little read. Pretty short, only 200 or so pages, or even less. And basically, there's an aging math genius guy who now kind of lives in isolation in this like shed in the back of the property where his daughter lives, or daughter-in-law, I think. But he's losing his memory, so it's one of those where he loses his memory every day. It's kind of the whole Groundhog Day type situation. And he gets this housekeeper who starts tending to him and where he lives, and she starts to befriend him, and she's saddened by the fact that he can't remember who she is the next day. She also has a son who starts bonding with the professor, but she's also disheartened by the lack of his ability to remember him, and the bond that they're forming over baseball, over math, and over all kinds of things. And there's a lot of little segments in here where the professor will go on these little rants about numbers, and the housekeeper will mention a number or a set of numbers, and he'll say, oh, well, don't you know that, putting 62 together with 25 in this variation, it represents, the number of grains in a, some kind of, it's that, he comes up with these incredible numerical sort of revelations, and she initially writes it off as silly, but eventually it has more of a profound impact on her. So, yeah, I would be definitely open to reading more Ogawa in the future, but I'm glad that I read this one. So I'll put those back, and then I'll really try to keep flying here. So next up are two from authors that I've heard about, and one book I've heard more about, which would be this one, Fredrik Backman, A Man Called, I want to say Ove. Is that the right pronunciation? Yeah, it's supposed to be funny, and at first sight, Ove is almost certainly the grumpiest man you'll ever meet, a curmudgeon, and then I guess what follows is a heartwarming tale of unkempt cats, unlikely friendships. I've heard good things about this. And then another author I wanted to at least have something on the shelves from, Chuck Palahniuk. So this is Invisible Monsters, and not one of his I've heard of. I've heard of the bigger titles, Fight Club and Choke, I guess, and a couple others. But yeah, I saw this at a library cart one day, and I think it's supposed to be pretty dark, as a lot of his books are. It's about a fashion model who has everything, but a freeway accident leaves her disfigured and incapable of speech, and she goes from being center of attention to an invisible monster. So Palahniuk made it onto the shelf with Invisible Monsters. And then next up we have, I'll do three of these because they're the same author. And like I said, I try to do author stacks up here a lot of times. I didn't do it for this author, mainly because I haven't read him at all. But I have hauled 3 books from him, mainly because I've just heard such great things about him. So we have 3 from Richard Powers. The Overstory, which I've heard, tons and tons about on BookTube and elsewhere. This one, the Pulitzer, I want to say. This one isn't stamped with the little award symbol on it, but I think it won the Pulitzer. And then I found this just the other day, The Time of Our Singing, Richard Powers. This one is from, when is this one from? 2003. So a little bit older. I think the Overstory is only from the last 8 years or so. But this was $1 and it was just perfect condition. Once again, as usual, that's my criteria. And then the other Richard Powers I have is Prisoner's Dilemma. Something is wrong with Eddie Hobson, Sr., father of 4, sometime history teacher, quizmaster, black humorist, and virtuoso invalid. His fainting spells have worsened, and his ingrained aversion to doctors worry his family as they try to discover the nature of his sickness. Just a little, snippet to see what that's about. But yeah, so there's three Richard Powers. Looking forward to reading him eventually. And then this shelf is going to take some time, unfortunately, it looks like. Okay, so then we have an author I've heard about, Paul Auster, The Book of Illusions. 6 months after losing his wife and 2 young sons in an airplane crash, Vermont professor David Zimmer spends his waking hours mired in a blur of alcoholic grief and self-pity. Then, watching television one night, he stumbles upon a clip from a lost film by silent comedian Hector Mann. Soon finds himself embarking on a journey around the world to research a book on this figure. So that's Paul Auster, which I've heard about. And then I've heard a lot about this book as well, The Brothers K. I've seen this book all over BookTube, and I see it come up in discussions of like great American novels from the 20th century. I think it came out in 1992, it looks like. Yeah, it looks like 1992. Found a pretty good condition copy of this, and I think it's a family saga. I don't know if they're based in I want to say the Midwest. I could be wrong about that, but I know there's baseball involved in this story, and it's just an American family saga is the type of book that one is, I think. Let's see. So Isabel Allende with Of Love and Shadows. I see her a lot out in the wild, and I think she's a pretty prominent author from the 20th century, and this one is probably the most common one I see, and I did grab it. So that'll be my first, Isabel Allende. And then this one, A Case of Curiosities, Alan Kurzweil, is historical fiction. In France, on the eve of the revolution, a young man named Claude Page sets out to become the most ingenious, daring inventor of his time. And I'll be honest, the primary reason why I grabbed this is I did a video early in this channel talking about China by Alan Wall, which is up here. And there's a word in that book that I focused on in that video called Wunderkammer, which is just a funny word that I learned, and it means cabinet of curiosities or a case of curiosities. And since that time, no less than 4 or 5 times I've seen books that evoke that exact terminology in one way or another. So this was called A Case of Curiosities. I think I found this shortly after having my fascination with that word from that book. So I grabbed it, but it seemed to be well reviewed and seemed to be a good bit of historical fiction. Okay, so then 2 female authors from the 20th century that I think are pretty well renowned and pretty important to read. At least that's the criteria I'm trying to get to with all these books. This is Blood Tie by Mary Lee Settle. It's the winner of the National Book Award. It's in a Scribner Signature Edition, which I see out there from time to time. And it was stamped with the library of somebody, LB. So somebody had their little stamp they put on these books. This is from 1977. So Blood Tie by Mary Lee Settle, and then Fear of Flying by Erica, I think it's pronounced Jong, but I'm not sure about that. You know, I grabbed this a little on a whim, but since researching it after the fact, I came to learn that I think Erica Jong is a pretty prominent, I guess, writer in the feminist tradition in the 20th century, and I have come to learn that this book is sort of like a sexual liberation book, I suppose, and that's what it's come to be known for, I think. But it's from the when is this from? The 1973. So 2 books from like female authors from the 70s. You know, again, just found each other on the shelf. And next is Abraham Verghese, Cutting for Stone. So I read this year. I read this it was one of the last fiction books I read. I've been on a little nonfiction kick since then, but I read this, I think, in August, probably, toward the end of the summer, and just really, really good. This was at a library sale sitting there, and I kind of was thumbing through it. And I wasn't actually going to pass on it, I think, but then a worker there, said really strongly, you know, you should read this if you haven't. It was just wonderful. And yeah, I read this and definitely agree. It's so far this year, it's in the running for possibly my favorite read of the year at this point. Marion and Shiva Stone are twin brothers born of a secret union between a beautiful Indian nun and a brash British surgeon. Orphaned by their mother's death and their father's disappearance, bound together by a preternatural connection and shared fascination with medicine, the twins come of age as Ethiopia hovers on the brink of revolution. Yeah, this was great. The main character, Marion, it shows them being born. It shows them being raised in an unconventional way. You know, the father isn't in the picture, and it plays a prominent role in sort of hovering as a ghostly figure over this unconventional family that ends up raising these two, and then to see them grow into teenagers in this and go through teenage love and teenage relationships and heartbreak, and but also then training to become physicians over in Ethiopia. And it winds a full circle story of bringing aspects of this family apart and back together again. So it's yeah, definitely highly recommended. Cutting for Stone. Maybe I'll go into it in more detail at some point with a video, but one of my better reads of 2025 for sure at this point. Okay, and then let's grab three more so we can keep moving. John Banville, The Book of Evidence. Pretty recent find here. And I think it is, let's see, it's from 80s, I think. 89, yeah, 1989. After free-falling through the indolence of California and the Mediterranean's sleazy seaside dives, Irish expatriate Frederick Charles St. John Vandervelde Montgomery is going home. And in the familiar confines of his hometown, he becomes obsessed with a novelty, a 300-year-old painting. Deciding to steal it to raise money, he senselessly murders an innocent woman along the way. So, character study, I guess, of this very long-named individual in this, but I've heard things about John Banville for sure. Similar to that, heard things about, that's kind of the theme here. Bret Easton Ellis, The Informers. So this is the one Bret Easton Ellis on the shelves at this point. Certainly, probably most known for American Psycho and maybe one or two others, but yeah, this is one that I've also seen talked about in high regard. So I do like the movie American Psycho, and at some point probably will read the book, but this is what I found, over that one, and I wanted to have something from him on the shelves to check out. So that one, and then this is Flashman by George MacDonald Fraser, the first novel in the Flashman series. So these are historical fiction, and the character Harry Flashman, meet him in the wildly funny and historically accurate cult classic that introduced us to history's greatest adventurer, randiest cad, and most incorrigible scoundrel. This one follows him as he lies, steals, duels, and wenches his way from 1839 England to India and the wilds of Afghanistan. So Flashman became a huge series, I think. And the reason I picked this up, not only for hearing about it, but also sometimes I do random number generator at my library too, to pick a library book to read. And one time I did it and it landed on Flashman, or a later book in the Flashman series. So I thought, you know what, I haven't been introduced formally to Harry Flashman yet at this point. So rather than pull, like the 6th or 7th or something book in the series from the library, why don't I keep an eye out for Flashman in my book hunting? And not that long after it, I did find a nice little trade paperback from Plume, a reprint of the original Flashman. So this will be my introduction to this infamous character once I get to that one. We'll do a couple more here at a time. So another author I've heard a lot about, Dennis Johnson. This is Already Dead. I don't think it's one of his most well-known or most talked about books. I think Jesus' Son, his short story collection, I read in college, I believe, in a writing course or something. I know I read Jesus' Son in college. And then since then, I've seen Tree of Smoke be talked about a lot for Dennis Johnson. But again, it's an author I always had in the back of my mind as, to keep an eye out for. And so I saw Already Dead out there quite a while ago at some library sale, so I grabbed that one. And then, this one's a little sticky, sorry for that noise. This is P.D. James, The Children of Men. So this is the source material for that movie, Children of Men, kind of a dystopian sci-fi book. I think the human race has become infertile, and the last generation to be born is now adult. So P.D. James, I believe, is more well known for writing mysteries, and she's one of the most famous English mystery novelists, I'm pretty sure. But this is more of a sci-fi dystopian type book from her. I started grabbing P.D. James a little bit more once I read something from her earlier this year, which was sitting right over there, Death of an Expert Witness. So earlier this year, maybe springtime-ish, I got my introduction to P.D. James reading Death of an Expert Witness, and I like that. It was good. Still trying to work towards mystery being a genre that I'm really, involved with and really mesh with. It hasn't quite caught on to this point, but her writing was good, and I've heard plenty about this book. So that will be my next PD James at some point. And then Patrick DeWitt, The Sisters Brothers. I don't really know much about this other than it looks like it's made into a movie, and it's kind of a horror western type mashup, I want to say. I think it's pretty recent, 2011, and it was a Booker Prize finalist. Herman Kermit Warm is going to die, and hired guns Eli and Charlie's sisters will make sure of it. So I guess it follows the Sisters Brothers. Their last name is Sisters. And I've definitely heard about this, and I haven't seen the movie or anything. John C. Reilly, Joaquin Phoenix, Jake Gyllenhaal, Riz Ahmed. So yeah, I almost was going to try to loop this with a couple other westerns, but it just seemed a little not a traditional western. It's a little more of a modern spin on that, I think. So next up is Colson Whitehead, The Underground Railroad, and this is the winner of the National Book Award from 2000, pretty recently, 16. So one of the more recent books I have, and I found this at a library. I believe it is what it sounds like. I think it takes the concept of the Underground Railroad in the slavery era and brings it to life. So it actually imagines it being a real Underground Railroad and goes over the operation of it, I guess, and then follows some of the characters with that. So I don't have any other Colson Whitehead, but this one I definitely did want to check out. Oh, also, he's the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. I don't know if it was for this book. It might have been for Nickel Boys or something, but yeah, definitely interested in this one. And then another one I hear tons about and see all over BookTube is The Book Thief, Markus Zusak. It is 1939, Nazi Germany. The country is holding its breath. Death has never been busier and will become busier still. I think it's a little bit of an unconventional type book in the way it's written. Like if you look through some of the sections here, it's broken into a lot of different parts, and some of the pages are like not full text. Some of them are there's some of this type stuff going on in here with illustrations. I don't think it's too all throughout like that, but I've definitely heard it's a little unconventional. I've seen it mentioned as like a YA book, I guess, but it's pretty well loved by a lot of people, so I'm curious about that. And then let's see if we could take these three together. These are kind of all similar format that I found. They're kind of these like smaller, chunkier trade paperbacks, not quite mass market. So, A Brief History of Seven Killings. Marlon James, Booker Prize winner, 2015. 7 gunmen storm Bob Marley's house, machine guns blazing. The reggae superstar survives, but the gunmen are never caught. It chronicles the lives of a host of unforgettable characters: slum kids, one-night stands, drug lords, girlfriends, gunmen, journalists, and even the CIA. So I've definitely heard plenty about that book. And then this one is, I found a kind of nice trade paperback Penguin version of The Discovery of Heaven, Harry Mullish. I think he is, I'm forgetting now. I know I researched this once I grabbed it. The most celebrated Dutch novelist of modern times, he's called. So he's a Dutch novelist. And this one, The Discovery of Heaven, was from 1992. So not that old, but already sort of carries the title of being sort of a classic, I guess. One of the most entertaining and profound philosophical novels ever written by the Washington Post. So if you've read this, yeah, I'd be curious to see your thoughts on it. It's pretty chunky. It's 700 plus pages, but I found it just a great condition Penguin trade paperback of it for $2, I want to say was this one. So curious about that one. And then I found this one at a library as well. The Business by Ian Banks. So with him, I think it's a British author. I think he's very well known overseas, but I think he was, I don't believe he's alive anymore, but I think he was both a literature novelist, like a literary novelist, but also a sci-fi novelist. And I want to say, I think I have the right author I'm thinking of. Yeah, he goes by Ian Banks, if he's writing just fiction, but he goes by Ian M. Banks with the middle initial if he's writing science fiction. So I was worried that this was in the wrong section and should be in the sci-fi section, but then I looked that up, so I realized he just does write just fiction. But yeah, I've heard a lot about Ian Banks, and Kate Tellman is a senior executive officer in The Business, a powerful and massively discreet trans-global organization whose origins predate the Christian church. Financially transparent, internally democratic, it wants to buy its own state to gain a seat at the United Nations. To take control, she has to do the business. So yeah, maybe like a thriller type-ish book there. And then just a couple more quick ones. I have two from J.M., not sure how to pronounce it, Coetzee, I think. Cutts. I think these are two of his most well-known, so Disgrace and Waiting for the Barbarians, both in these like thin little penguin versions. He won the Nobel Prize, and Disgrace won the Booker Prize, I guess. So, or maybe Waiting for the Barbarians won the Booker Prize. Not sure, but I know these two are highly recommended to read from J.M. Cutts, and I think he's a South African writer, and I don't know if these take place in South Africa, but I know that the politics of South Africa over the apartheid and related issues, I think, factor into the books as well, if I'm not mistaken. And then finally on this shelf, last but not least, is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Ken Kesey. There's a lot of editions of this that I see out there. I do think it's in the Penguin Classics at this point. I'm pretty sure I've seen that. But this is kind of a cool little floppy signet novel that I found. It's not a classic or anything. It's just a signet book. It's kind of one of those little miniature ones in between a mass market paperback and a trade paperback. But yeah, so this is from the 60s and perfect condition. And I like the artwork on this one too, sort of the kind of blurry kind of scape on that one. So that's it. That's it for that shelf. Now I got to work on putting it back together. But that's shelf number, let's see, 1, 2, 3 we've done in contemporary fiction of this walk through the books I've gathered in here to constitute my reading project coming up for the next foreseeable years in my life, which is to establish a reading baseline of books and authors I've always heard about and wanted to check out, and then use that as hopefully developing further niches, further interests, and forming judgments on some of my favorite works that I'm going to hopefully read. So that's shelf number 3. Thanks for checking out another unfortunately long video, and hopefully I'll be back with another update soon. Thanks.